Welcome back to Metal of Honor. I'm Yidna. This tutorial is going to run you through how I make this pearl ring. It's quite a bold design, easy to hold, easy to get to for the cleanup. Should be a nice simple task for literally any of you watching. There was one little snag. The footage for the initial step rolled piece of metal that makes the initial shank that I bend round on the wire bender was unusable, and I don't know what happened there, but I'll put a link in the description below to show you how to make that bit. But just start off with somewhere between 4 and 4.4mm square wire. But yeah, please like and subscribe, especially if you want to see the next video, which is going to be a tool sharpening video. I'll run you through how I generally sharpen and polish my stone setting and engraving tools. But for now, please watch this one. Yeah, please enjoy. So literally starting by cutting through the twisted up band. Like I said in the intro, I'll put a link in to one of the other videos that has got like a kind of identical start off for the main step rolling. But yeah, this is a case of just holding it nice and firm on your bench peg. Either a 2/0 saw blade or above will cut through this nicely, but just hold it nice and firm. And any sawing like this, as soon as you're just about to break through, if you're not brave enough, just tilt the blade up a little bit so that you know it's going to go into that little V shape of your wooden block rather than straight through your finger. But it depends how used to it you are. Because this is a very simple ring. It's a case that this is a ring that I needed to make, and I thought it's quite a nice simple one, and it's not too hard to get right. So it's quite an easy level, this one. But because I had to make it, I thought I might as well record it. Because it doesn't take they don't take that long at all. So you can see here, after cutting through, it's still got enough movement from the last time that it was annealed, and just pulling it over. Sometimes if you have a little gap, you can jump back onto the ring bender and just push it around, maybe more from like say 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. That will bring that gap in nicely. Then straight onto the soldering. Same as what I've always said, always put the heat one side, and the hard solder, as always, on the opposite side, because it will always drag towards it. It's just a natural thing that I do now. It's quite easy to get the hang of. But as soon as you've done one side, because you're not 100%, because the hard solder always goes, any liquid metal always goes towards the heat source, but you flip it over, just in case it hasn't soldered, and that heat, as you see just then, will just draw up through that gap the last little bit of solder, so that you know you're safe. And at the same time as it's on the bench peg, just anneal the whole thing, because you might need to tap it round a little bit as well if you haven't made it completely perfect on the ring bender. Like I say, I'll put a link down to a previous video that's got that. I've got no idea why that didn't record properly. There's a series of the clips on this one where I hadn't noticed, but the actual microphone link was out the top of the camera into the actual wireless box, which as soon as I noticed that, I popped it back in. So of course you're going to hear the commentary, but there's a few clips where you won't hear the bench sounds on some of it. I can't think how far through and which ones were affected. Yeah, so after using the hand file, that one I just used a cut 0, then a cut 0 half round hand file, then a spinner, just to clean up those edges. It doesn't really get much more simple than these sort of rings. And the same cut 0 file, you could use a cut 1 maybe, And it doesn't matter what metal, even if I was doing this in platinum, I'd jump straight in with a cut 0, cut 1. You won't have any problems. Of course, like if it was platinum version, you'd feel the actual file sort of getting clogged up a little bit more, and you might need to clean that out a little bit more. But I've done a video with how to clean out files. It might have been on a short somewhere, but it'll be in the simple workshop playlist. But yeah, but you can see when I'm filing up rings like this, I'm always constantly moving both bits. It's almost like I'm curving the ring into the file. If I hold it straight and just sort of do this, or hold it sort of static and do that, it's not going to be as free flowing and file up as quick. But doing it from both sides, you can see I'm sort of, I'll do like the top part, then I'm sort of leaning on a 45-degree angle, slowly sort of curving up around, then sort of breaking down into that little sort of knife edge, and just gradually bring it all together so it's got like a nice overall curve to it, and it just makes everything come together nicely. Of course, it does depend on what ring you've actually designed and what you want the final outcome to be. But being that this has actually got, I think it's about like an 8mm pearl, a cultured pearl, sort of like pink tint to it. But due to the size, it's going to sit out quite high, and being that it's such a big curve, if I put that into a ring shape that's very blocky and square, it just doesn't balance off. It will literally look like a football sitting on top of a brick wall in your garden. It's just about balancing out curves and shapes so that designs look how they should be and not sort of too alien. There's the risk of, it's how I find a lot of CAD CAM or like 3D rendered stuff that's cast. I find a lot of that has been made by people that don't actually set their own stones. So when you see them, especially if they've got sort of quite elaborate sort of shapes to them, different things all happening, quite often you can sort of see that the stones aren't really ever going to sit in there. The design doesn't look like it blends together nicely. I normally describe it like a kid's Lego set that looks like components on a computer screen, then just sort of plonked together. But yeah. Okay, so this one, you can see a lot of that I did on the corner of the peg, just to get that side solder bit gone, because you notice on that first bit of solder, it did happen to just jump towards me a little bit, which I don't worry about too much, as long as you're not hammering that in before you're filing it, you can file it straight off. It's normally more of a problem when you do that. But like this, I've used the same file, sort of literally planished off the top, nice and flat. I've done a couple of curves, slipping back down into the edges of how I wanted the shape to be. Then like a 400 buff stick, just bringing it all together. And I'll do the same again on the other side. But this just brings it all in, brings that whole thing, so it's all nice and smooth to look at. Sort of, and if you buffed it with like your eyes closed and you weren't looking, it's just got a nice feel to it. It just rolls, you know. And again, even when it's on like the top of this screw base hand clamp or like ring clamp, I'm always turning it. I'm never keeping still. You find sometimes if you see people, maybe just like a basic wedding ring, could be like 3 or 4 mil court shape or something, and where they're sort of doing lots of little bits, trying to file that shape in. By the time you've got it, it's almost like an octagon or a hexagon or something. You've got like loads of flat spots. But if you can turn both hands at the same time, it saves you so much trouble later, and it just makes your workflow a lot quicker, a lot smoother. So once that's all buffed up, notice I don't go down to an 800 grit or anything like that yet. We just need this a nice shape to basically start with. But this is mainly from looking at the side, choosing the thickest point for like the centre of the pearl, and then a rough marking for like the 8mm. See, I don't even measure it up, it's literally just by eye. To jump onto the main pin, you can see this is like just under 0.7mm square. This is what's going to go up through the whole ring into the pearl for when it's glued. And if I was actually making these, I'd actually make a longer length, put it in my bent, go up onto the main workshop vise, put one end in the vise and just keep turning it. But just for quickness, so that I could actually record this and just make my life a bit easier, I've just done it at the bench, just 2 parallel pliers and just keep rotating, and it will form like a big long spiral. You probably only need about 6 to 8mm of this in the end. Some people do use just a straight pin going up, so they'll put a little bit of glue on for when they put the pearl on, a little bit in the pearl cup. It'll work fine, but I think it's just it's more psychological for me. I just like to know that there's like a spiral, so it's almost like it's quite tight fitting, and it's almost like I've had to screw the pearl on, you know. So if for any reason the glue did, if it were to come loose, it's got a much better chance of staying on this. You can notice that the glue might be getting old and it might need sort of cementing or things like that. But yeah, so just a nice, and you don't even have to worry about it being like that was a nice even spiral. But yeah, it could be chopping and changing. It's all hidden afterwards anyway. You see that was over 8mm pearl. So, and I think it's about it's the 7.5mm cup that I'm making for it. I think this I've got about 0.8mm thickness of the disc. I didn't actually measure the thickness of the disc and show the camera. But yeah, it's just about 0.8. You could go down to about 0.5 if you want it looking even cleaner, to get the pearl to sit down a little bit more. But this is all about this design, but it was really just about the whole thing being quite bold, quite strong. But yeah, 7.5mm disc cutter. If you haven't got one, just cut out a circle into a doming block. Normally like a size, either one hole bigger, or you can do the same hole that you want to end up with, but just changing to a slightly smaller ball punch, just to get that edge. And you see so many people doing different ways of doing these. There's not really a right or wrong way of doing your actual cup. It's such a basic thing. You could do that as the first thing that you ever make and it will come out well. So for the very first start off little U shape, which is where the pearl cup is going to sit into, this is like a 5mm chainsaw file for sharpening your little teeth on the chainsaw. And I will literally just take this down so I have about 1.2 to 1.3mm thickness at the actual base. You could do it up to 1.5, you could have it a little bit higher sitting. Doesn't matter too much. It's not like this sort of ring isn't going to be an engagement ring. You're not really going to plan to have a wedding ring to sort of shape around the side of it. It's normally just going to be a dress ring on another hand somewhere, so you can have it quite low and not have to worry about what's going to sit next to it. If someone was silly enough to have this as a wedding ring or as an engagement ring, as like an everyday wear, expect trouble. Try and put your customer off of having something like that. But you could do it so it sits up higher and a wedding band would sit underneath the cup. So at this point, it's very much a U shape. So that's why I've just put a little bit of blue Sharpie pen, good old Sharpie pen, couldn't be without it. Then a cut to like the 20cm, like 8-inch-ish needle file. I'm just going into there. You can see just by sweeping from like sort of left to right, starting off quite close to you, sweeping away, you'll see that it just touches the side edges. It's not going to take the bottom away, and by the time it starts taking the blue pen in the very centre away, that's when you know that your cup's almost going to fit. As you can see, when I try it on, there's still a gap at the very bottom of the arc and it's touching too high. So this part as well, if you notice that to flare out the top edges only, I very much rest my thumb on the file and sort of coax it over whichever direction I'm going, but generally find it easy to go away, to sort of move away from you, but always pushing forwards and rolling at the same time, and then flipping it around, then you can get to the other side. But you basically do that until that cup sits in nicely. Yeah, like I say, this is a good simple project to do. This didn't quite focus in how I wanted to here, but yeah, but you can see it's got that nice almost matching archway down for it to sit in. So you might need to go back to this a couple of times, giving it a little tickle here and there, just to make sure it's sitting correctly. What you notice is that after I've done this, big difference between these ones and ones that I've seen other people make is that they'll have the pearl cup, soldering the pearl wire, then when it comes to actually putting it on the ring, they're kind of fiddling around and trying to work out where it's going to sit nice, and but it ends up not quite in the middle. The whole pearl ends up looking pissed, whether it's leaning to the side or it just looks off centre. But you'll see how I do this one, it's a bit different. So again, as soon as you've done that, you're just going to give the sides a buff up, because you're going to have a bit of swarf there, a few burrs sticking out to the sides. But yeah, at this stage I do go down to like an 800 grit just to get it that little bit smoother. So now when I actually put it on, keep it at the angle, hold it central, and you'll see, it's hard to see it on camera, but when you're actually looking at it, you can see actually, like from the side, especially when you look under a microscope to sort of double check, but it's got a nice flatness there, so you're not going to need like a crazy amount of solder, like the case of putting a bit of solder on, then the whole thing just going through, and then having to put more on because it's still gappy. But yeah, that's when you know you're ready to sort of go for that final prep, ready to solder the whole thing on together. So again, on this top arch, I quite like this thicker rim. Like I say, it's 0.8 sheet, but where it's on an angle, it does make it look slightly wider, a bit more prominent there. But by sitting that cup on the bench peg, especially when it's level as a bench peg, a fine marker, you'll find the centre a lot easier. You see it wobbling, and you'll just see that movement. But you can double check it with your verniers anyway, just making sure it is central. But normally this is the quickest way, just to let sort of gravity and a level surface rock it. Yeah, so a 1.1mm twist drill straight through the centre. Being that it's in the cup, you don't really need to, if you're a bit worried about it sort of starting to sort of like wander off like your actual twist drill, you could always do like a little ball burr and just like a little zip, just give it a little zap, and then do your twist drill central. But if it's a nice sharp drill, it'll just go straight through and you'll be fine. So after you get it to this stage, then you see how I do get it to like an 800 grit as well, just that little bit smoother. A thing to note at this stage as well, silver and golds generally like to be like shiny, like really smooth surface to smooth surface for the solder to run nicely. Whereas platinum and palladium like the joint to be a little bit rougher. That's a huge tip actually that no one ever tells you. And you notice there, by resting that cup on there, holding it all very central by eye, pen in the middle, you can mark the exact centre of the ring, and it also makes sure that the whole thing's just going to sit right. And because of the size of the actual wire, you can see I can put the whole thing through in one go, and because it's got the twist, I can actually hold it quite tight and really sort of like press it in nicely. So you can see there that the pearl cup is still wobbly a little bit, but the pin is in the right place and it's just going to hold there. When you've got a softer soldering block like this, you can actually press it in to the soldering block. Like the last stacker ring set, you see that I did actually put a pin, a couple like sort of dressmaking pins, just down the side to keep the actual collet level. But this one you can just press it in and it's okay. So that one, you see that me sort of prepping up that first bit of flux, and then just putting a little bit more on. Especially being silver, the cleaner the metal can keep itself under the heat, the more chance you're going to have of the solder flowing exactly where you want it to. And as soon as you see the solder melt, that would actually be soldering the pin. There was a little bit of it started to melt previously, so it did go on the bottom pin. But yeah, but as soon as you warm it up to the right level, that whole thing floods right through, and it's literally all soldered at the same time. You haven't got to keep going back and forth. There's nothing that's gone out of shape or wobbled. It's just there, and it doesn't really get much easier, to be honest. You see just a few little side cuts. The side cuts there, just snipping off that little inside bit. I can't remember the exact level on this that I cut. It's probably about 5mm sticking up there. But before you've actually done this, you'd actually check that wire in the pearl to make sure it goes in. That's the one thing. That's one thing that I did forget there. But you can buy pearl drills as well. So if you need to open up the hole, or if you haven't got a hole to start with, if it's just an undrilled pearl, you can buy all the bits for it. And then, because of it being silver, sadly, it's going to get fire stain. So that's why on this occasion, I have gone back to a 400 grit paper, because you can't see it on camera, but you do get that fire stain, or some people might call like fire scowl. But on silver, it's really annoying. There's loads of ways to try and prevent it, but none of them are 100%. And if people, there'll be people that will be putting fire scale stuff on all the time, like various methods of doing it. But there's always one patch that you've got to buff over, and if you're going to buff over all of it, I just rarely use it. I'd rather just buff the fire stain off after, because it's rare that it'll be more useful if you're making more intricate little parts in silver to try and prevent as much as you can. But when it's a bold shape like this, especially, it's you can see once it's all soldered, I can get to every single part of this with a buff stick anyway. There's not any like little nooks and crannies that I need to try and get into. So yeah, at this stage we're literally heading for the finish line. So we'll mainly do like the 400 grit, just making sure that fire scale's gone, which and the fire stain stroke fire scale is one of the big reasons that, like when I was at college, like before I'd done my degree, like just doing like a BTEC 2-year course in like major study jewellery, I made a very quick decision that I never wanted to be a silversmith. How seeing some of like my old college friends doing silversmithing, literally making up big jugs and like different sort of drinking vessels or sort of silver shot glasses. So even something small, seeing them get all the fire stain out, especially by people that are making big bowls, literally just sitting with like a pad of like washing up sponge for doing your dishes and stuff, just sitting in it with like pumice powder, just slow. Honestly, I'd rather just put my head in the forge or in the vat of like the acid. There was just no way. I'd done it once and I thought, no, small scale for me. But yeah, silversmithing's a nightmare. Anyone out there watching that does silversmithing full time, complete respect to how you've managed to still keep your sanity just from all the boring bits. I don't know how any of you do it. Yeah, you deserve a medal. Yeah, so now we're going on. So I've done all that part, and again getting up to like that very edge, and you see me sort of almost peel it back a little bit like I did on the stacker rings. Of course, there's no in between bit on this, but this is like with the 800 paper, and just gradually getting all that curve in, getting all the shape nice, getting it exactly how I want it for my pre-polish with the harder felts. So like, now I've mentioned about the silversmithing, I can't get my head away from that. Yeah, a nightmare. Nightmare. Don't know how they do it. But yeah, you see that even on this stage, apart from the bit that's right next to the pearl cup, the rest of it again, just trying to get as close to that bit as I can. But for the rest of the band, it's always moving the whole thing. I always say it's a bit like sort of rubbing your tummy and patting your head at the same time. If you can do all that, you've normally got a good bit of hand-eye coordination that you'll be able to get away with picking this up quite easy. So there shouldn't be no reason why you can't get that flow and get that movement. And literally all of this is muscle memory as well. If you make the amount of pieces that I make sort of on a weekly basis, it's like riding a bike. You just pick it all up, and the more you do it, the more that muscle memory just sticks there, and you don't have to think about it. So again, I've done all the buffing, done that little edge chamfer with that little spinning sander. So basically just to get it ready for like the pre-polish. And again, if you haven't seen the video of how I make these felts, I'll put the link into that below as well. Because you can see how these felts, like just the shape of them, how they help literally everything I do. Yeah, like I said in that video, they're a game changer. I personally couldn't be without these now. They just always help so much. And normally for the backs of these sort of shanks, you do see that I use the top of the felt, where it's almost like a chimney sweep. That top bit that I use. If you pre-polish as well, I don't go into my final polish until, properly anyway, until I use like a fluffy mop scale over. You see, even on these inside curves, I still use the top of that polishing felt. But when it comes to doing the inside of the cup, you'll see me flip it over and use the inner side. And at that point I do that, you actually see the way it goes straight, and it actually bends up and continues straight, and it goes up as it's spinning. So it just takes the shape of whatever you're actually polishing. So I'm quite happy with the pre-polish at this stage. So just a little bit more tickle over, then you'll see me go to the main underside. Yeah, anyone will have to let me know if if you ever go at this as well. And as soon as that bit's done, it's a case of just going on with the fluffy mop, just to get that final sort of shine that I want. See the knife edge part of that I do to get inside that little lip. So now you see, I didn't want to pause it, do it in slow motion, but as that's going around that curve now, this is what I was explaining a second ago, it just takes that shape, that mop that's technically flat, it does just take that shape and it sits back down again. Yeah, it's so handy. So now I'm just going to go just the normal, same as you've seen me do it loads of time, literally touching all the surface, like cross-hatching with these little burrs, like inside, all the way around, just in a bit. Then after that, you'll see me actually go onto the fluffy mop to do the outside bit and a little bit on the inside, just to get it completely shiny before it goes into the ultrasonic for the cleaning. If you haven't liked or subscribed yet, any likes and comments would be appreciated so much, just to help any of the videos. The next video, which will go on probably towards the end of the week maybe, I'm kind of hoping. I don't want to leave it a whole week before I put that one on. But by popular demand, or popular demand for me, there's about 4 or 5 people before that have mentioned about the tool sharpening. So yeah, 4 or 5 people is popular demand. So the next video is going to be on that, me doing about 3 different scorpers, how I use them, 2 different ways of actually sharpening, and a bonus little tool sharpening section at the end of that video as well. So please like and subscribe if you want to know how I actually sharpen my setting tools. So I know there's definitely a few people that are really wanting to see that. It's quite simple. Right. So this is one of those little old bristle burrs that's just been used so much it's worn down. But they're quite handy for getting inside little side collets and things like that. You don't really need to do this bit. You could, if you're worried about it getting the post and bending it over in half, pretty much, just don't do that bit. It's going to be covered in glue anyway. So there's stage, it's already in the ultrasonic, been cleaned, come out and dried. So now with a 2-part epoxy resin, I'm sure most people, whether it's for the jewellery making, for things like that, for pearls before, or if you just use it for DIY stuff. But this is just like a cotton bud or Q-tip, I think some countries call it. But it's basically a cotton bud mixed around until it's completely mixed. Then just a little bit on the pearl posts. It's pretty much coming up to an end, this bit of video. But yeah, just minimal. You don't need a super amount. Then you're just going to put the pearl on and then just give it a little twist and wriggle as well. And then just let it set. This is the fast drying one. If you're not as confident that you're going to get it accurate on there, you can use the precision one that you've got 20 minutes to adjust. But yeah, and I highly recommend the bit that you've mixed the araldite on, or like the 2-part epoxy, keep that so that you can come back in 24 hours and you can sort of dig your nail in, just make sure that's set properly. But that's just to know that before your ring goes out to a customer, you're going to be 100% sure that it's not going to fall off or anything like that. You know you're going to be safe. But yeah, I'm literally going to leave it there, cut straight away. Please like and subscribe. Tool sharpening video coming next. Appreciate you watching. Thank you. Take care.